Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we'll wait for another 5 minutes and then we can get started, inshallah.
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's get started. So let me introduce Irshad Chohan bhai. Mashallah, he is a senior solution architect. Amazon Web Services. He has played various roles, technical and management role. He was CTO for Nibel Technologies, and he has worked with TCS, Mobility, many such companies. A lot of good ties in this field. So last time when we met, when he showed us his expertise, we thought we should have his session for the larger crowd. So that's the reason we have him here today. Alhamdulillah, we are fortunate to have him here. And sometime soon, inshallah, this Hajj, he's starting his Hajj journey. So we thought before he start his Hajj journey, we can have a overview of the architectural field. So, and once he comes back, inshallah, we are going to have the physical sessions as well. So over to you, Irshad bhai. Jazakallahu khairan kaseera for giving us time. And I thanks everyone here who have shown interest in this topic and who are eager to learn something in this role. And one sincere request to all the participants here. So keep yourself muted. And if you have any questions during this session, so you just post your question in the chat window. So later we can take these questions, inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan kaseera. Over to you, Irshad bhai.
Jazakumullah khair, Shahid bhai. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Rabbi shrah li sadri. So I think Shahid bhai has already given my introduction. Just to add to it, I've been in this field for last 15 years. I've played various roles and the technology domain, mostly with mobility, integration, analytics, as well as IoT. Worked with the pharmaceutical domain, healthcare domain, agricultural domain, and now in the education domain. So before joining AWS, I was CTO for Nibel Technologies, where I handled basically 200 odd engineers company. And post that, I've joined AWS now as a senior solutions architect. I work across most of the education edtech customers in India now at my role. Any edtech in India as well as Bangladesh or basically SAR countries. I work with all of them, help them consult, build architecture which are scalable and this. Now, coming back to this series of being architect, this is the one actually which I've already delivered two workshops in the past. One as part of the Nebel technology, where I felt that typically I saw that most of the engineers, especially in the IT, let me, sorry. So just before I jump onto this, I just wanted to put up a disclaimer. This came during my earlier discussion that architects can be in any field, but this session is especially targeting the IT field of engineering, whatever you want to call it, maybe computer science or IT engineering, either of that. So that's what we are doing it here. Okay, intention. So why? For me, I'm only doing it for basically for the ummah. I don't. Doesn't want anyone to basically publicize is for me. I'm only doing it for the Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, so that Allah Ta'ala will give me this whatever the ajr out of it. But yeah, for the ummah, if anyone is basically needing any help in terms of how to build their career quickly, so this is what I certainly saw as a pattern, that most of the IT engineer they stuck at SDE role or software development engineering role, or maybe a tech lead or a senior engineer role. Whenever you get, let's say, in your career graph, 3-year experience, you become a kind of a senior engineer in the team. 3 to 5 year depends on which path you are choosing. And then from that time onwards, for I saw many of them actually have an experience of 10 year, but still stuck to that particular role, right? The major object challenge there is that we know how to write code, but it's just that we are not able to think a broader picture, and we are not able to find out the common logical work around how we typically think about an architect in the IT field. So this session was to unlock that area. So anyone who is actually having more than 2+ year of experience or 3 year of experience, and anyone above, being a technical lead in the role or a senior technology engineer or a senior in SD kind of a role, and wants to look towards become a technical lead, technical architect, solutions architect, this would be more beneficial to you guys. Today it's more of an introductory sessions at what we are going to cover and what it would be. Overall, my objective is to run it as a full-fledged workshop, which requires at least 16 hours of your time, including workshop, hands-on coding experiences, and how to think while designing the architecture, which would be done mostly from the August onwards. And I would be happy to basically collaborate with others who is already in this field, maybe as a cloud architect or as a data architect or any other architects in that particular field, who can come together and we can deliver this part on part in these upcoming workshops. So today is more of an introductory session, but you will inshallah benefit from it, even from the technology part of it. So from that side, actually, I'm going to start. And if you have any questions, as been told that you can put it on chat, I will look at it every 5 to 10 minutes, and I will be try to answer that during the session. And anything which is not off the context, I will take them at the end. This session I'm going to run for 45 to 50 minutes based on the time which we have now. And post that, I would be here at least next 10 minutes if you have any questions on the technology or not. With this, the agenda for today is to get the fundamentals of architect. What is the job of being an architect? What are the different architect in the IT field? And what kind of different requirements you go through? And a typical, which is very critical about being an architect, is to understand what is the strength and trade-off of your solution which you are proposing or building, right? So, and then eventually at the end, I would like to know each other that what you are. In the end, I'm going to publish a link for everyone, but I will also pass it in the chat. So if anyone wants to basically register it right away, they can do that, right? Now, what are we, right? So I typically take this from this civil engineering analogy, which is the first engineering stream in the world, right? So if you talk about a field like civil engineering, you will find there is a labor, right? And then labor is actually simply putting the bricks over the mortar and trying to build a wall. Then there is maybe a karigar, which you call him, who is more efficient in doing that particular work. There could be a foreman on top of it who is more like a contractor, or basically looking after a group of karigar and laborers together, right? And then there will be a contractor who took up a particular work, maybe out of plumbing, maybe out of building, simply building the beams and everything, right? And then comes the engineer, which is actually either targeted to build how the architecture would look like, how, what would be the pile strength and how much they need to do with that, and what should be the beam size and all, right? But if we consider the same thing in terms of the software engineering, we do have basically a very kind of a very naive definition in that. What I typically say is that even a labor in software engineering call themselves as an engineer. Be it a karigar, he is also calling himself an engineer, and engineer is also an engineer, right? But when we think about this as a perspective, we need to think about how we are doing our daily work and what level of work actually we are doing. If we are simply writing the code, that may not be an engineering work altogether. It could be a simple labor work or a karigar work, right? Which is like senior software developer engineer, which we call them. Engineer is actually who can build the logical components together and think about how this would scale and from the different perspective, right? So, and that's what we are going to learn in this particular session. So if I simply take that analogy of a constructor in construction engineer, there is a similar field as a software engineer. There is a structure engineer who builds the overall layout of the building. Then there is a solution architect that in the field. Uh, in civil engineering, maybe these are roads, right? And then in IT, we call, maybe it could be just the protocol, be it WebRTC, HTTP, Internet Communication Protocol. So having that understanding is also critically required. Then we can have a building blocks or buildings basically, and in the software world, this could be our software. So for example, for a company, you require multiple different software. One could be simply managing your internal employees. We call it as an employee management system, or HRMS, right? To handle our customer workload, we call them customer relationship manager or CRM, right? For handling all the asset inventory or the work which, or basically material which we are having, we do have a ERP kind of a solution, right? And so you consider this like these are multiple buildings, and then you are communicating between these buildings to build a more efficient solution overall, helping the organization. Similarly, in the civil engineering world, there could be a simple building which is a residential, another is maybe more commercial complex, and there could be hospitals and other things, right? And you are simply connecting them. We put up traffic rules. Here we put up those as a condition, business logic, that how things would interact with each other, what would the protocol layouts and all. Yeah. Then there are requirements, right? And these requirements have two types of things, which is called functional requirement and non-functional requirement. So one is which is actually given by our business users, or maybe a business architect, so to speak, or a domain expert, who asks us to build a certain things from his experience perspective. And then there is non-technical part of it, which is more technical part of it, that how that requirement would fit with respect to the scalability, security, and other thing. That something is something which we need to think about, right? For example, any vehicle with tire can run over road, right? That means we are building an architecture which is very low coupled. So anyone who can come with the tire, it's like it can work on this model, right? And then for example, any switch, if in electrical engineering, if you are designing, it should follow certain standard specification, right? It should be a 3-plug pin or a 2-plug pin or a 9-volt pin or a 12-volt pin. We simply design it, and then whether you attach it with a fridge, air conditioner, or anything, geyser, anything can work with it. So this is called a low coupled design in terms of our real world. So we need to think about, when we are building this application or this type of a system, we need to think about these things in a similar analogy, and then we will take it from there, right? And eventually all of this in the runtime, we actually capture the signals, like red light signals, monitoring camera, and want to capture that details. So these are like, in our world, we call them logs or alerts, which we are setting up in the system. So let me just go through the chat, and if there is any questions. No. So feel free to put up if you know, if you don't get anything, if you feel like you're not able to understand or I'm going too fast. So let me know. So I'll accordingly tweak my presentation. Now, so start with the requirement, right? So the number one thing for, especially in the service or product engineering, we typically gets the requirement, right? A simple requirement, let's think about if you are building an application which is let's say employee job portal, right? I think this is one of the project which we thought to build in MFIRD as well. So let's say we are building a job portal. So we need to think about what requirement is what we need. So for then we think about what is the user or the persona and who is giving the requirement, or from which perspective we need to add up requirements. So for example, let's say there are two types of persona here, or two types of user who is going to work with our system. One is who wants the job, and one who gives the job, right? So let's call them, let's say, prospect or people who are looking for a job. And then there is employer who is actually wants these employees to get hired, right? So let's say the prospect want what they want. They should be able to create their profile, they should be able to upload their resume, they should be able to search all the jobs which is available and relevant, they should be able to apply filters, right? And then let's say if they should be able to apply to any of these jobs, and eventually they can mark, yeah, I got the job or not got the job, right? That way. So it's like these 5 requirement is from the uh, let's say students or people who is job seeker, right? From the employer perspective, they should be able to, let's say, put up their job requirement. They should be able to filter job seeker for that particular requirement. They should be able to check the resume who have applied for that, for their job, right? And they should be able to select or not select a particular job seeker for for the further interview and all, right? And then they should be able to remove the job, filter the job, list the job which they have published, right? So like these are the 5 requirements from the job seeker and 5 requirements from the employer perspective. But this is more from the user perspective, right? So this is we call functional requirement in typical world. Okay, there could be different terminologies in each of the area, but this is the functional requirement. The another part comes the non-functional requirement. So what is non-functional requirement here? Let's take the same example again now from job seeker perspective, that job seeker should be able to register itself, right? So I need to think about how many job seekers are actually going to come to my website, right? So I would say, okay, no, it's a new website, so maybe 100 people I'm expecting every day, right, to get registered in my database. And eventually in the 6 months I'm going to have, let's say, 600,000 registration in my websites, right? So that defines my scalability requirement. Okay, one is concurrency, that how many are can be done at one particular time simultaneously, parallelly. Okay, another is overall how much I can actually get the data. So I need to think that perspective in the requirement. For the same requirement, the registration, I should be able to handle 100 concurrent registration. That's my one of my requirement. I should be able to register 600,000 entries in my database or in my storage, right? So this is my non-functional requirement for that functional requirement. So we need to think about this. Now from security perspective, I want that one employee, there should be only one registration from one employee, one job seeker, right? So for it should not be that I should be able to simply use my email address and create 100 different profiles. So that's a uniqueness which I want to build, right? This is another requirement from the security angle. From compliance perspective, I don't want to publish email address and phone number unless employer is let's say interested in a particular profile. So that's like another non-functional compliance or a privacy requirement which I want to build, right? Then there could be another angles like this. So there are multiple such examples which we call non-functional requirement. So for example, it could be performance, scalability, availability. Availability is, for example, what if my sites goes down, right? For example, let's say if the website is like naukri.com, I can't afford more than, let's say, 1 hour of, or let's say even 10 minutes of downtime for my application. But for, let's say, for MFIRD to start with, if it goes down during the night for 15-20 minutes, I'm okay, but during the day it can't be down for more than 15 minutes. So that's my availability and uptime requirement, right? Fault tolerance. Like for example, if my database crashes or my application server get crashed, how, whether it should be able to recover out of it automatically or not, right? So that's another fault tolerance requirement. Security we discussed. Disaster recovery, let's say if I deploy that application in my MFIRD local on premise, and let's say due to flood or simple, let's say if electricity goes out, what should happen, right? Whether my application should be down, I'm okay with it, or should I, if electricity is down for let's say more than 4 hours, it should be able to recover itself and then get deployed. Or let's say the internet cable does not work, or internet is not working for let's say 4 hours. So what is my disaster recovery requirement for the same? Accessibility, right? So so accessibility is again, for example, my website, what if people, let's say, who are not having good, let's say, eyesights, and they want to access my website, so am I giving an option which is maybe a high contrast websites and all, right? So that is an option which am I giving that, right? Many a time if you see that some of the website you try, it does not work in a particular browser, or does not work in a, let's say, mobile based machine. So that goes my accessibility part to it, right? It also goes in the usability as well, but I'm just giving you an example, right? Then the management, right? If somebody, let's say, made an wrong registration, am I giving an option for internal audience to make a check or make a correction from the backend system or from a different portal altogether, right? Typically we call, there should be an administrator. Let's say somebody says, hey, I've applied for the job, but I'm not seeing that it is being connected properly. For those corner cases, will there be any management portal? Do I want to build a monitoring dashboard that how many people are registering every day as a dashboard, right? Auditability, that what has been done in my system from the job seeker perspective, how much registrations have actually happen every day, how much job I have given, and all those things. Am I actually creating a proper audit records of that, right? So all these requirements typically calls as a non-functional requirement. Okay. Similarly, there are other requirements like flexibility. Like as I've told, the same can be applied multiple places. Like my application, the same application is working in web as well as flexibility enough to make it work in the mobile or a tablet. It is working automatically, right? Extensibility, that I'm working it in my portal, but the same portal I can integrate, let's say, with the LinkedIn, with others, and my jobs are automatically visible there as well. That's an extensibility part of it. Maintainability, I worked on a technology which is only, let's say, for example, I made it in very a technology which is outdated or very new, both area. Let's say I built it in Rust, but I'm not finding the developers for it. That goes my maintainability part of it. Interoperability, right? Whether the same website I'm able to interoperate in the other, basically, it could come into multiple factors. Maybe it could be language or others. So we'll go into details on each such requirement, and then we'll build a use case in a workshop to understand what it each means. These are not the list completely, but there are more to it. At simple perspective, there are two types of requirement. One is runtime, one is static. So for example, anything which you do before deployment is called static NFRs, and any time which you think about, which only you are able to verify them after deployment, is your runtime NFRs. So the left hand side is all typically runtime, and the right hand side is more the static NFRs, which you design, which typically occurs in the design phase. The legal, regulatory, localization, affordability. I can't build a website, let's say, which is I've made it only for a particular technology which is very expensive, right? So it is not affordable for the customer itself to operate. So all these things typically taken into picture. Now, who's in? So I think I have already covered this, so I'll skip this. So who is an architect now? So this is my personal definition: the single person who own these non-functional requirement as a business analyst, as a project manager, and as a QA or a quality analyst is the architect, right? So if for every requirement, are you able to think about the capturing the requirement? Like business analyst role is that, right? So uh, just to get an idea, how many of you are having less than 3 years of experience? Maybe either you can use chat or.
सर चाय पी के थी फोन पे के साथ
Okay, so is there any other option I can ask? Q&A. Okay, so basically so there are multiple roles in IT. Okay, good. I think raise hand is a good option. Thank you. So there are Irfan is, I think, having less than 3 years of experience. Thank you. You can now okay, thank you. So basically, there are multiple roles in the IT industry as well. Let's say there are software developers, then there are tech lead who work with these developers, then there is tech architect, solution architect, enterprise architect in the team, and then there are the non-tech role as well, which work with the technical engineering team is business analyst. Business analyst is the role which works with the end user or customer to understand the requirement and then document it for the technical team, right? So these guys are business analysts, right, who understand a business domain or a knowledge, and then they write the requirement which is being shared with the technical lead to understand, and then they are building it. Then there is project manager who works work with the engineers, identify the timeline, identify the two requirements and how they're interrelation with each other, and then prepare a plan accordingly. And third is the quality analyst who test these requirement, right? Whatever we said as a functional requirement I'm talking about. So who tests this requirement and then you build it. Okay. The non-functional requirement, so as an architect is the one you need to think about. You are a business analyst in perspective that every functional requirement which is coming, are you able to understand the non-functional requirement attached to it, right? If a simple login or any functional requirement, if you're thinking about it, it could be all over together or a particular segment. You understand that and then you build the requirement document for that, or let's say understanding that requirement first of all, understand their dependencies with each other, and then you should be able to either explain someone that how you can test it. For example, I say okay, this is how you test for 100 concurrency requirement. Then you should be able to explain it to quality engineer or yourself that how you are going to test it for, what should be the test case for testing the performance or the scalability for this requirement. So single person to own the non-functional requirement is an architect. Okay. Now, different types of architects. So there are different types of architects. These are not only architects in the IT, but there are could be more based on the definition. But these are like high level architect. They're data architect. In data architect, I can say there are data science engineering stream is also there, and then there is data engineering architects as well. So both typically goes under data architect. Then there is DB architects as well, which is kind of especially designed for non-relational most of the cases. Otherwise, it is being handled by DBA. So that's another area which you can think about. Then there's DevOps architect or an infra architect or a cloud architect is being called. Then there is solution architect who think about overall solutioning multiple components together. There could be one level below as a technical architect, and then there are user experience architect who are more of a non-technical role but also falls under this, who is designing the application and see whether it is going to actually work or not. Then there are business architect, this is an enterprise architect. These two are from the high level enterprise governance perspective, and for a very large organization we have this. I'm not going to go into details in both, but I'm happy to take these questions later for business architect and enterprise architect. This is more for 10 plus year of experience and targeted only for enterprise companies, so I will take that. If anyone is doing TOGAF or Zachman kind of a course, this is what it goes to. Now, as an architect, what we do, right? As an architect, we need to think about making long-term decisions, right? If somebody goes same, I want to build a job portal, and you can build that maybe a simple within 3-4 days or a week, you can build us a very simple portal, right? But it's not whether it is going to work for a long term or not, right? So whatever requirement customer is coming up with, we need to ask the right question to understand what he's looking after a year or 3 years in the horizon. So make sure that we are building the application which is actually scalable for that, right? Whatever we are, second is whatever we are building as an architect, we need to understand what is the strength of it and what are the trade-off. So no architecture is wrong, right? But as an architect, we need to be very sure of what is the trade-off or what are the cons or what is the weakness of my architect. It's okay even to have a simple like for example, this meeting, we all got a meeting ID and passcode. So, but we are okay that anyone who is sharing it is a legitimate user. But it could be that if I share it to my status and then everyone else can join, I may not know whether it's the right audience or not, right? But we are okay with that particular trade-off. So as an architect, I should be aware of my architect's trade-off, right? Third is like ability to communicate it to non-tech people. You are very good as an architect, but if you're not able to explain it to the business analyst or the customer for the NFR which you are going to propose or work, it's kind of, you're not able to do the justice to the job, right? So that's another. And third, for last but not the least, is ability to document and present it both. So if I'm saying, okay, whether you should have a certain level of compliance or a legal requirement, if I'm not able to explain it, then if customer says, no, I'm not able to understand why you are proposing such a high complex architecture, then we should be able to understand, document properly and present it. Okay. So in our workshop, we are going to go through this in details, and we are going to talk about each pointers in details. This is what is the one philosophy which we all built, that whatever system we are designing as an architect, it should be that developers can change anytime, right? But architect would be there for long term. So we need to think in this way that, okay, architect can know things, but if architect replace, it would require, but any developer who goes away from the system and another one gets added, there should not be any change in the architect, right? So that's one thing which we take about it. We'll go into further example in our workshop for this. Now, uh, here comes the more technical part to it. So typically there are three aspects which we are going to cover as part of the workshop in much more details. There are three different things. One is design principle, right? This is one set of those principles. Then there are design patterns, right, which works how you design the modules together. And then there are architecture patterns. So architecture pattern where you're, so with modules you build a component or a software. How you are going to communicate between multiple software is something which you are going to think in the architecture pattern. So we are going to cover cloud architecture pattern, data engineering architecture pattern, and especially more focused would be on the software engineering architecture pattern. So we are going to go in details on all these three angles. Okay. Now starting with the design principle. So design principle are nothing but certain kind of rules or commandments which you can't simply verify whether it is being followed or not followed, but these are some guidelines which we give to everyone. Okay. I'll talk about one of them. So for example, solid design principle is very common as a design principle. It's basically, if you take C, S stands for single responsibility, O is open close principle, and the list of substitution, interface dependency, right? So single responsibility principle. So one of the principle which we need to follow during our coding practice or a module designing practice, that every particular function should only do one job and one job, right? If we are building a particular class in Java or a particular file in Python, don't add multiple things together in the same class. Make sure you can make a smaller classes or smaller functions, so each functions does only one job, and so that you are able to very easily verify it, right? So this is one of the principle which we always recommend, or basically take it further. Many times, for example, we are taking the information, we are validating it, and then we are making entry in the database. So that is why basically what we do, we break it out into three layers. One, we do validation, another we make a database entry, and third is all the business logic in it, right? Then there are open close principle. So we'll go, we say open for extension, close for modification. Means anything whatever we are writing, it should be, somebody can plug to it and make it work, but we should not be making it, anyone can simply take it and then modify even the business logic for it, because this actually breaks the overall designing. Basically then you are not able to trust the system, that where things are happening, right? And then there are other things which will take separate. Then interface aggregation is very easy, means where you actually create an interface on top of it for whatever you're building as an implementation, so that for others it becomes a specification we will follow. This also allows you to get to the open closed principle part to it. So we are going to do the coding workshop for the solid design principle in our workshop. Then there are other principle which we think, don't make me think. So for example, a simple idea is if you're naming a particular function or a variable, don't make it int a, int b, int c, right? Actually give a name. Let's say it's a parameter a, parameter b, and sum of parameters, right? That way, if you are naming the variable, if anyone is reading the code, it does not require them to think. Okay, or making a, let's say, function name, don't use shortcuts, use the full name itself. That becomes much easier, right? So don't make it make me think, or keep it simple stupid. That's the name for it. Jagni is you aren't gonna need it. It's like, don't build so futuristic that you are unnecessarily complicating your architecture. And especially it is very right in today's world that with the cloud and with the things which we are at our end, we can very easily scale our solution. So of course architecture should be extensible, but we need not to build all the function today itself. For example, the same job seeker portal which you are, let's say, thinking to build for MFIRD, we should not be thinking that all of that would be built, that okay, we are looking for building something like naukri.com and having all the full-fledged functions in it today itself, right? So that's another thing which typically we fall under trap as an architect or as an engineer, right? They start building everything on the microservice today itself, which is not even needed right now, right? And don't repeat yourself. A rule of thumb is 3, that one time you write it, second you're still okay to write it again, but third you should always then make it reusable so that it is being shared across. So do not that's don't repeat yourself, dry principle. And then there are other principle of least astonishment on there, which we are going to cover, right? So the another aspect which we are going to cover is the design patterns. So design, as I talk about, these are more of a principle which you can't simply put up a rule to check. But yeah, it requires software engineers as well to start thinking in this perspective. And whenever you are doing as a code review, we need to think these principle whether these are being followed or not, right? Especially the low coupling and high cohesion, which we are going to cover later. Design pattern is nothing but where you are building the small functions or classes or module, how they should interact with each other, right? So there are different design patterns. So there are typically 3 different categories: creational design pattern, structural design pattern, and behavioral design pattern. So this is not the complete list, but you will get an idea. I'll talk one in each example today. Okay, creational design pattern, right? This is a favorite, everyone's favorite, that singleton design pattern. If anyone is going for a job more than 3-year experience, they might be knowing at least one of that, which we typically take during our interview, right? Singleton design pattern is where you only have a single class and only have a one particular object in the memory of it. So when we need to have it is something which you do it, right? Another is factory, right? So for example, you think it about actually a factory pattern, right? The other two are very same, but we'll talk about the factory here. So for example, let's say you are building a class which gives you an object based on your configuration, right? And you have a very set factory rules. Okay, you want, let's say, 3 plug plugin or 2 plug plugin or 9 volt or 12 volt. So instead of you creating multiple classes for each, you create a base factory pattern and you pass your parameters, and it automatically returns you the object. For example, it could be that you put up a key, I want a 9 volt model, and you get that directly from the factory, right? So that's how it works. Builder is like one level above. For example, it's, you think it about this, that factory is more of where you say ki, I want Lenovo, let's say what, Apple MacBook model number this, I want that, and factory will automatically returns the final object for it. But builder is more like where you are thinking about building a custom PC in which you don't have a particular model, but you actually gives, I want 8 GB RAM, I want 80 GB hard drive, and I want this and that, and this type of monitor, and this. You pass all these parameter, and then it builds in the backend, and then gives you the object, right? Prototype is where you actually gives a copy of the object, which it clones and then creates a new object out of it and give it back. So these are different. So whenever you need to create an instance for an object, or basically whenever you need to instantiate it, uh, or basically for general audience, for every class, when it actually has to come in the memory, it actually creates an object of it. So what should be your object creation strategy or object creation pattern? You need to think from these list, and there are other lists as well, but you need to think in this fashion, that what's your requirement and which one would fit here. right? And as a tech lead or as an architect, you should be able to tell to your developer, hey, this should be singleton, this should be factory, and this should be prototype. So right, so that way you can define your requirement. Another goes is structural. I'll take the first example, adapter, right? In our case, in India, all three pin plugs are basically the same, right? Basically, yeah, based on the voltage, there are two or three different flavors to it, but anyone can plug any appliances to these plug and it works, right? So that's how you also need to design a system, right? So what it happens, that your backend system would be the same, which is actually giving you the electricity outlet, but you build a plugging architecture, which is an adapter. It's a three pin plug adapter or other types of adapter, which allows you to plug to it, right? So that's your adapter pattern. Decorator, for example, a typical requirement is, for example, in backend you get, let's say, an object, and now you want to massage it and modify it. For example, a simple pagination object in backend, you simply pull the 10 objects and then you add additional information top of it. Okay, how much time it took, which is the user and everything on top of it, and then you returns back. And then there are facade and proxy and other structural design patterns as well, which you need to understand. So basically, creation is how you are going to create the object. Design pattern is how you are going to give those objects back to the system. So this is more at the API level that you need to think about, whether you need an adapter, proxy, decorator, facade, or any other things in the structural design pattern. Third is the behavior, how you design the behavior of the system. Simple things which you are connecting with multiple, maybe a for loop, or this chain of responsibility is very common, and I think 50% of the audience, which is 3 to 5 year experience, typically understand that. But let me take a simple one, circuit breaker. In our home now, most of us have the DP, right? So if any plug gets sparked, we automatically that goes down and electricity for the whole house goes away, but it safeguard your electrical appliances as well as the wiring, right? So similarly in the system as well, for example, if you build a system, an API for the same, let me take an example of job portal, right? Okay, Ismail had a question of, there are total 23 design patterns. So there is no hard and fast rules to it that how many design patterns are there, but each of these category there could be more, and there are more people who creates more design patterns on top of it. But yeah, this could be a good list where maybe a list of 23 would be highlighted on top of it. But integration architecture, integration design patterns are separate, so that could also add to it. So hope that answer your question, Ismail. Now, let me take this same example, the circuit breaker. For example, I have built an application and I said, okay, as part of my concurrency, my system should be able to handle 100 registration at the website. What if you build that system, but you suddenly got a 200 request on your website? So either it can crash your system, and even those 100 legitimate users are not able to work, right? Or you can build a circuit breaker that anyone who is hitting more than let's say 10 times on your website should get an error. Okay, you hit too many times, right? Many times you saw that message, too many requests, right? So that goes from the circuit breaker pattern which you implements for it, right? Mediator as well, where you're actually integrating with multiple systems and then you becomes a mediator in between. That's another things which comes into place. Then there are logger, interceptor, caching, which we add as a feature on top of it, right? For example, cache through strategy, where first time you get it from the database, you keep a copy in the cache. Next time if the same request come, you serve it from the cache and return it back. So many times we do this is as part of our coding, but it's like, oh, let's build this as a cache. But if we call that, okay, this is my caching pattern, then it would be very easy for you to reuse your efforts and as well as replicate it, and call it a common language while talking to the other architects in your system. So for example, there is cache through strategy pattern, and then there is cache aside strategy pattern. So what's the difference between the two and all, we are going to discuss in our workshop. So we cover all the three on the high level: creational design pattern, structural design pattern, and the behavioral design pattern. Okay, let's jump on to the architecture pattern. So as we talked, there could be data engineering architecture pattern, there could be cloud engineering architecture pattern, and then there are software development engineering architecture pattern, all the three which we are going to cover. Okay, so number one is a decoupled architecture. Okay, so where we talk about this is more from the principles approach itself, that your modules we should be able to break down them, right? And similarly, we should be able to break down our technical modules, and then there are how you communicate these modules together, then we need to think in that. So during our code itself within the single module, we actually communicate them maybe through an adapter pattern or a behavior, right? A chain of responsibility, that how it is communicating with others. But if let's say these are multiple module which is being hosted, then you build a different mechanism to communicate. So for example, if it is a microservice architecture, you either use event bus, which is a, let's say, separate technical component altogether, where you place all the message similar to what bus works, right? So for example, all people who want to go, let's say, I don't know much location in Hyderabad, but let's say from Toli Chowki to Mallepalli, right? So all we need to go is to go to one of the stop at the Toli Chowki, wait for my bus, and then it takes us to that particular location. Then we go from there to the actual processor. Similarly happens in the event bus. Then there are queues where you sit yourself, and then gets delivered to that particular location. There are multiple things internally which we are going to discuss later. Or it could be a scheduled base, right, where I push all the messages, but I will pull that, let's say, every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes, right? Or this is typically, let's say, if you're building a dashboard or a monitoring, right, I don't do it right real time. If it is not part of the requirement, I'm going to do, let's say, every 10 minutes, check all the new registration and then update my report. All right. A request response is where I'm giving a simple API access on top of it. Okay. The benefit of that would be, if my modules are decoupled from each other, I can individually scale each module, right? And that allows me to basically make it work. Now, so this is like decoupling is one part. Scalability is another, right? So then we discuss how to add cache at every layer, right? That's one of the architecture pattern from the SDE as cloud architect both sides, right? Asynchronous architecture, we talk about this event bus architecture with queue and stream. Then there is event driven architecture, event sourcing architecture, and CQRS, command query request segregation, basically. So event driven is very let's think it about this way. For example, if there are two systems which talks, one system always shares an event. Let's say a registration happened, right? Or a registration created or employee created. That's an event, and I can subscribe to it. Whenever employee get created, I should send him an email. That's one of the way. Okay. Or event sourcing, where you actually create a system event, where, let's say, for example, think it about this way, that database has a trigger, right? What are the triggers? That any table, if you're doing create, update, delete, and before and after. So it's like before create, before delete, after delete, and before update, after update, right? These are the 6 event which are fixed irrespective of the table, and I can easily build a trigger on top of it. Trigger as a logic. This is more in the database perspective. I think people who are from the database part, they will understand this. So trigger is like, if that means, then anyone who can build an application, they will simply do an insert in the table, and based on the logic, whether it is before insert or after insert, your trigger will get executed and make a separate entry. So that's an example of event sourcing architecture at the database level. But similar things you can also build it at your application level, where you define the standard events, basically, or technical events for your system, which then anyone can consume and build on top of it. GitHub is a good example, right? GitHub gives you those standard sourcing events, and then it's up to you whether on file committed what you need to do, or file pushed what you need to do, right? Those are the things which you need to think. CQRS is more complex, which we are going to cover in our lecture. Then we need to think about redundancy for the scalability as well as resiliency, right? Redundancy is nothing but duplicate your code at multiple places, or multiple software, or multiple hardware. Either way, you can actually build the scalability for your application. Another could be, let's say, if I'm sending SMS, right? If I only get SMS, let's say, from Airtel, and if Airtel server is down, what will happen to me, right? So then you build a resiliency there by having a redundancy. There is an Airtel network, there is Geo network, as well as VI network. So you can use any of them which is available. So that's what. Then there is processing at edge design, which we are going to cover later. Similarly, for performance and availability, what are the things which we take, right? So performance and availability, we talk about rate limiting, right? For example, if job seeker, we are building a system which should handle 100 concurrency of requirement, then I should be able to set up a limit. Okay, then one user should have maximum of 10 requests in a minute, because I'm not expecting more than that, right? That's one way. Retry pattern is where, if one time, if my request fail, automatically it retries again and again. It depends on how you want to do it. And then there are event-based action and resiliency, master slave leader election, which we are going to cover in our session. Then there is disaster recovery. What is RTO and RPO? right? A simple definition of RPO and RTO actually helps you understand how you build your system's continuity, uptime and availability, as well as disaster recovery. This is very crucial concept as an architecture, right? RTO, for example, if my system goes down now at 11:51, if let's say this Zoom meeting, if it goes down at 11:51, and let's say it takes me at least 5-10 minutes to come back to the system, right? That's like my RTO is 5 to 7 minutes. Or let's say my internet goes down now, and it took me 5 minutes back to, let's say, enable my hotspot in the mobile and join back. And let's say it is now 11:55. That means I got a RTO of 4 minutes, right? But let's say I thought I was down at 51, but you are not able to listen to me because of my network is from 11:48 itself. So that's like my RPO, my data loss was from 11:48 till 11:55. So it's like that's 7 minutes of RPO. So that's how you design your system, that how much data loss you can bear and how fast you want to recover, right? So based on that, you design your system, what's the resilience you need, what's the redundancy you need, and the other aspect to it. So there are different strategy which goes that if you're okay with RR of RTO and RPO, then backup and restore works. But if you are looking for an RPO RTO of 10 minutes, then you have a system at a smaller scale running separately. If you want within minute, then means within, let's say, 5-10 minutes, then you need to have a similar replica at the other stand, which is warm standby. But if you want zero RTO and RPO, then you need to build multi-site active kind of a thing. Zero RPO is kind of theoretical. So because of the network connectivity and all, you always need to have maybe 1 second, 5 second, 10 seconds of activeness there. Okay. And similarly, cost also increase. So many time customer, when we work with them, they say, now I need zero RTO and RPO. But when you talk about cost, it goes to backup and restore. So that is why we say ki architect is the responsible for business analyst, project manager, as well as this. So we are able to understand the cost implication of the architecture, as well as how we are going to design the system and how we are going to test that system, all the three. Okay. So this is one. Now, this is more of from the technology side, but we always say you are not able to give justice to your role if you're not able to understand how a particular domain would work. This is very critical, especially for healthcare, fintech, and actually many domains, or basically all the domains at one lens or the other. Right. A simple example would be, let's say if somebody is building a Quran understanding app, but if he doesn't know how to read Quran itself, then it would be very difficult for them to actually build that application. Whether simple idea would be a LTR, means right to left, or a left to right, how they are going to design it. So basic understanding of the domain is always needed. So that's why we recommend that there is one principle which even business analysts follow, that 5 I principle. For each question, you go in details to understand how they are going to build. So we are going to do this as a workshop as well, that 5 I principle, how we do it. Okay. Second is the compliance and legal requirement from your domain. I think PCI DSS is, I think everyone would be knowing it from the fintech. For example, if you are storing credit card information in your system, your system should be PCI DSS compliant. If you're working with any system which actually captures data for 12-year or less student or children, your system should be POXO compliant, right? Especially if you're targeting US market or Europe market. That means you will not be able to show any ad, you will not be able to personalize it, you cannot do it without consent of their parent for this. So these are certain the requirement which comes in the POXO, right? HIPAA compliance from the healthcare perspective, right? So if you're capturing patient information in India, it is still not legalized, but there is already law which has been prepared. But in Europe and in US, it is very much needed that the system should be HIPAA compliance. That if your data get leaked, then how quickly you need to revert back. What are the audit logs which you need to manage at each level? That's something which it basically talks about. GDPR, I think at least we know the terms. We are going to go get details in our session. So we need to understand which domain we are working, what are the compliance and legal requirement of it. How we need to build our understanding of the domain, why it works, how it works, and what the function and benefit which customer is eventually going to get out of this. And then there are certifications as well, like banking, there are industry certification, healthcare industry certification, or for example, there could be a functional certifications as well, like SAP certification, Salesforce certification. This gives you an overall understanding of a particular domain, as well as a particular tool, so to speak, in that perspective. I'm not talking about the technology part of it, let's say an ABAP developer certification, but let's say basis certification, which talks about the compliance part of it. And then there are enterprise architect certifications as well, which we typically consider under only business domain understanding, is like TOGAF, how things we need to think about, how different architect in the enterprise company works with each other, right? What's the role and responsibility of each architect? It starts with enterprise architect. It starts with actually business user and then the business architect, then goes with the enterprise architect, then the solution architect, then the technical architect, then the engineers, right? And then the cycle repeats. So how you are going to work with it? Then if you're working in CISO or security domain, then there are CISSP certifications and all, right? And then there are cloud certificate as well as AWS certified SA Pro or any Azure or any other platform, so to speak. And Zachman is another thing. Open Group Certified Architect is another thing which talks about enterprise architect. So yes, so this is basically it from my side. Hope I was able to finish on time. This is a link I would suggest if anyone of you guys are interested. We are going to cover this as a 16-hour workshop. So either it could be 6 workshop, 4 hours each, right? Or 16 to 18 hours work, 16 to 24 hours workshop, which we are going to cover. Or I can cover it in 3 Saturdays, full 8 hours every Saturday. Or it could be a other way, which that's something which we can finalize during our discussion. So people who are going to register will be creating a WhatsApp group and finalize our schedule. I wanted to be I have done this online during COVID for our Muslim brothers in Maharashtra at the time, and I did this for Nebel, for the basically engineers within the Nebel at the time, for 3 to 5 years engineer at the time. So I did this in both ways, as a offline model and as this offline model would gives you more benefit, and that's what I was thinking basically to go it this way. So anyone who would like to participate, or anyone who wants to basically collaborate to become basically uh, to take some of this session during this workshop, I would be welcoming them. You can connect with me on WhatsApp directly, or with Shahid Bhai. Maybe I can create a separate group for those guys. Anyone who is interested to join this session in person in Hyderabad, they can register on this website. And we will share a separate poll later that how you want to do it, and based on the more number of recommendations, I will be actually governing that. As one way, is there any architecture or design pattern is 100% resilience, or we have to make our system as resilient? So theoretically, yes. So resiliency you can get, for example, so SLA wise, there are certain services which I'll talk about. Let's say in the public domain, this information is already available. Amazon has a service called as Route 53, where we give an SLA of 100%. Okay, 100% SLA. This is the only service in AWS where we are giving target of 100% SLA. That means we need to go with that level of resiliency in multiple aspects, right? But yeah, again, theoretically it can be possible, but again, it would be a challenge to get it done practically. Means hypothetically there could be a scenario. Let's say I've deployed my application across 3 different geography at 3 different location, but it could be a possible scenario that all the 2 geography or 1 geography got affected at once, right? And that actually gives my application a jolt, right? So of course we can design a system. So it is always about an SLA, which actually talks about a time period, and then you consider that how much downtime you can afford. You can't say 100% 24/7 every time it is going to available. You say 99.99% uptime and availability. That gives you a window of 30 minutes of basically what I could say, 32 minutes of downtime, which is not planned. Unplanned 32 minutes of downtime is 4 nines of availability every month. So I think if that's the case, I think that every month or every year, sorry, I have not done this. Now, so hope that answers your question, Javed. So but yeah, you can build that application for 100% resiliency this, but RPO is theoretically not possible because of the geographical limitation. Means even the light cannot travel up to a certain second. There is always a millisecond latency between the two systems. So yes, then you can build a resiliency and get it done, but it could be theoretically, that's a area of gap. Now, will this session be helpful for QA lead? A question from Akbar is, if you are so this session would be helpful for QA lead if you are also talking about the automation engineering part of it, or future if you are thinking about it, this would be really helpful in that area, because performance engineering is actually a SDE part of it. Only in service industry we separate QA engineer as separate and developer as separate, but most of the product engineering does not differentiate that now, right? They simply call them engineer, and they typically either do both job single guy, or they repeat every sprint. So that is why if you're thinking about automation engineering part of it, or a stress, like we do penetration testing and other testing, from that angle it would be helpful. But if you're only thinking from a manual test QA lead, then this session may not be fully helpful in that case. So hope that answered your question. Irfan, anyone who can provide offline session in Bangalore again? Maybe. So
Yeah.
idea is, yes, Shahid bhai.
Yeah, I think we can explore the expertise there as well.
Yeah.
So we can go in the collaborative approach. If
Perfect.
somebody can cover some of the topics there, so other rest of the topics you can cover
Sure.
remotely as well.
Correct.
Or we can plan even your visit there for the weekends, and then complete the session there as well. So later on we can think of.
Sure. Sure. Jazakallah khair, Shahid bhai. So I think, yes, I also have recorded during the COVID, so I can share those links for the people who want to do it offline. So you can go through it, and if you feel comfortable doing it at your end and wants to discuss it further, you can connect with Shahid bhai or me. We can take it in that direction. Okay. How open AI tool helps to data architecture? Can we do some automation using open AI tool? Ibrahim Arif Sheikh. So Ibrahim has this question. So OpenAI tool data architecture, there are certain use cases people are building on top of it. So OpenAI, for other people, it's like, you can think about ChatGPT's parent companies. ChatGPT's company is called OpenAI. So there are people who are actually doing basic data massaging on top of ChatGPT, but I think most of that can also be done with a very simple code as well. So I would suggest think about Code Whisperer or building a code out of this for the data engineering, which can actually help you do this automation automatically. So that way, I'm seeing many people are thinking about it. For example, hey, means on ChatGPT, you write a question that can you convert write a Python code which helps me convert CSV data into JSON, and you give both these formats, and it automatically helps you write a code for it, which you can simply put in your Python automation tool or something in any other tool. Companies are also working now with the with integration with the generative AI, which is like generative AI is a common terminologies on top of what ChatGPT does in the backend. Actually, it's nothing new actually, right? ChatGPT make it more trending, but it's been done by I think 3-4 years itself. You might have seen okay, face changing videos and Obama ka video you might have seen in the YouTube. I think that was 1 year, 2 years back. So it is already there in the market for a long time. It's just that it's now being democratized, that within free you can access this very easily. So that's why it is there. So there are companies who are building this as part of the tool. So for example, yeah, this is in the public domain. One of the company called as Canva, which helps actually UX engineer or UI designer to easily build either code, basically images for content which they are placing. You can type it in your chat, it can generate images, it can do a lot more things on top of it. Even it can generate Android UI automatically from it, or basically the Android XML or the iOS Swift that UI part automatically based on the screenshot which you provide or which you type. Give me a login screen page, it automatically gives you that. So that way people are using it. But yeah, if you have further question, we can get it details later. Qasim has a question. Assalamu alaikum, Irshad bhai. Can an IT capacity manager have a scope of become infra architecture? IT capacity manager. So only thing is, we need to if you are able to understand technology, how it works, of course, on top, you can easily become an infra architect. So in, or basically anyone, even I will not restrict anyone ki even I have in my team in AWS who are chartered accountant, and within 3-4 years of path on IT they actually become a very good principal solutions architect. Or people who are coming 12th fail, and they were doing simply gaming, earlier they were simply tweaking games and selling it online, and now they become an architect. So yeah, IT is very open for everyone. We don't discriminate anyone on the degree or anything like healthcare. But yes, you can build it. You can have a path for it and easily do that. And as an IT capacity manager, you already understand how asset work, how inventory works, and how you design the system. We just need to build our mindset that how the scale would work for these things, and then you can become an infra architect on those perspective. Only thing is now infra architect is line is very blurred with respect to the cloud architect. So I would suggest think both together, and you can get maybe a workshop or trainings on those areas, and you can become that. Zamir Bhai has a question that I am an IT security risk management background. Will architecture training will help my cyber security career growth? It is going to help you, but whether it would be fully, because this 50% content would be targeted towards the development engineering part, which you may feel, let's say, redundant or not useful. But it would help if you are thinking in this perspective that how the other side of the things works, on top of it how you do the pen testing, that way it is going to help you. So one of my colleague actually did a simple CISSP certification right now. So he was, first time when he tried it, it's one of the complex certification in the security domain. So he failed it in the first attempt just because on the HTTP and the API layer questions, it was not able to basically understand it. But second time, then he worked on understanding the engineering side of it, and then he cracked it again after 4 months. So overall learning will not go waste, but yeah, you need to have a bit of a open mind to understand other domain as well, rather than focusing yourself on the security, because once you start understanding that, it will be helpful for you. So as I told, we'll be covering cloud architect, where security is always a cloud and infra architect, which is security would be the primary concern. Data engineering, where the data, what we say, the data loss or CIA, confidentiality and integrity, typically comes in that area, which is part of the security only. And the software development engineering is also part of it. So all those three together. So cyber security content, which we are going to cover especially, is just 10% of the overall course. So you take a call accordingly. Jazakallah khair, Habib bhai. PPT for our reference, yes, I can share that. Maybe I can attach it here if it is allows me right now. I'm an SAP basis consult. Will it be helpful my career growth? It would be more of an informative for you, Merajuddin bhai. But yeah, if you are into so SAP now is moving toward Fiori and other things basically. If you're thinking in that area, and if you have already an expertise in that area, maybe even a 1 year experience with it, SAP, Fiori and the other tools, I've worked with them in my pharma time career. So that way it can help you. But otherwise, it would be informatory purpose. If you want to cover certain sessions, I feel free to, okay. Uh, and otherwise, it would be, I don't know, means how helpful would that be? Okay, thank you everyone. So let me do two things. I'm sharing this PPT now for other people, and I can share a recording as well for people who wants to, let's say, do it from Bangalore, or wants to, let's say, listen to it. And then and please do register if you are feeling, I've shared this in chat. So if you feel that it is apt for you, uh, and if you are able to commit those 24 hours, right, both things, right? So many a time uh, we are interested, but commitment is also required. So I think let me paste it again if it is handy. So hope you are able to access this link. If not, let me know. So this is a high level PPT link. I have the content for the overall, but yeah. So this is the PPT link. If anyone wants to go through this, it's viewable only mode. You can go through it and access to this. I'm here till 12:20. Other, if you're okay, if you don't have any questions, you can drop, right? And but yeah, if you feel anyone else can also benefit of it, please share this link with others. I'm also I'll ask Shahid bhai to share it in our chat group as well, so that we'll do it from the 1st of August onwards. Objective is the same. Either we can cover 4 hours, 6 Saturdays, or 3 full Saturdays, 8 hours, 3 Saturdays. So either way, I'm okay. Uh, and it would be a hands-on session. So make sure that any programming language is okay, Python, Java, or you need not to be a web engineer to understand most of it, but one language would be more preferred. For cloud and infra architect, even a shell script programming, if you are aware of, I think that would be also helpful. So that's it.
Yeah. So any other question? Anyone has any other question? Yeah, I think so. Let's close here. Thanks, Irshad bhai, for this wonderful session. So it has covered a lot of insight into the overview of being an architect. I think so. To understand more in depth, I think we need to go through the workshop, which I'll also be interested to go through that. So I think uh, as already you have shared the link to register. Based on that, inshallah, once you are back from the wonderful Hajj journey, inshallah, you do dua for us also. May Allah accept it. May Allah make your journey easy and accept it. And similarly for all Hujjaj Ikram who are going there. So please do remember for us in your precious duas.
Inshallah, inshallah. Please make dua for me as well, that Allah Qubul my Hajj and make it asan for me and other Hujjaj who are going.
Inshallah. So there is another Hubble architectural help for a mobile app developer. I think regarding cloud carrier perspective, which certification is best, AWS, Azure, or GCP? So some more questions are there if you want to take it.
Yeah. So regarding cloud carrier perspective, which certification is best, AWS, Azure, or GCP? So so now I am being from the AWS and I've worked there. My answer may be biased, but I'll give you two perspective. Irrespective, so you need to think about which opportunity you are having. So see, every industry is only covering the implementation part of it. Cloud architect as a role is a logical role. So for example, I have joined AWS 3 years back, and I have not done any certification, so to speak, for it, but I was able to crack interview and understand the concept of it, right? So every certification of individual cloud company, be it AWS, Azure, or GCP, covers how they implement the architecture pattern in their platform, and they will make you simply aware of it, right? So that way it is going to cover. But so basically your knowledge of cloud architect would be more of a generic, that how event driven architecture works, how event communication is going to work, how the data engineering pattern typically works. And now if you are working on AWS, you would be learning event driven architecture through event bridge or a CloudWatch event on those area, right? Whereas if you're going to Azure, maybe there could be Azure Data Factory, or there are terminology for the data engineering. For GCP, it could be different, right? When we say, let's say, cache at edge implementation as an architecture, then in AWS it could be CloudFront edge functions, or Lambda functions, or other things, right? Whereas could be in Azure, it could be Azure functions or Azure Cloud Functions, something like that. GCP, it could be that I think they have Firebase function, Firebase Cloud Function. So each would have their own way of implementing things, and each of the certification typically talks in that for. So I would suggest having the foundation level understanding is very much needed. But yes, from the documentation perspective for the architecture, I would ask you to go through, just Google search on Google for Azure Cloud Architecture Pattern. They have in detail about the different architecture pattern, actually not the Azure part, but overall architecture pattern on this particular website. I would suggest go through that. That will give you an idea, and we are going to cover this in our workshop in the architecture pattern part of it. So this is a very good documentation done by Azure. AWS also have done it, but I feel this is more relevant. From an market opportunity perspective, AWS being the leader, you have more opportunity there. But if you're working in, let's say, in .NET core domain, and you already have an opportunity or opening in the Azure architecture space, then you do Azure certification. GCP certification, I won't recommend. Yeah, they are still growing, they are still learning. Yeah, if you have an opportunity, do it. But otherwise, let's say if you don't have any opportunity, SA Pro, AWS would be more preferred. If you have an opportunity for a particular one, you go to. But each of this, don't think about that they will help you understand these patterns. They will only help you understand the implementation of those patterns, not the topics. So to understand those topics, I would go through these, the Azure Cloud Architecture Pattern documentation, and that is something which you can refer. Hope that answer your question.
Yeah, I think if no other questions, we can conclude this.
Okay.
So, Jazakallah khairan kasira wa ahsanul jaza. And in the participant, if we have any expert and if you want to share your expertise with the group, with the forum, so please reach out to us. We can get a slot for you as well.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khairan kasira wa ahsanul jaza. Okay, thank you. Let's close here.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair.